We're learning the Sikha on Perek Beis of Pirkei Avos and Chelek Yudzayin on page 356. This is a Mishnah in the second Perek of Pirkei Avos. Rab Shimon Omer. Rab Shimon says, "Have a zohar b'kriyas shema b'tefillah. Be careful to say kriyas shema every day and tefillah to daven as well. Ukishatem mispalel. And when you daven, al ta'as tefiloscha kva. Your davening should not be a routine act. El rachmim v'tachnunim lefnei hamokim. Rather, your davening should be begging Hashem for mercy and a supplication. V'al tehei rasha b'fnei atzmecha. And the final lesson of the Mishnah is, in your own eyes, estimating yourself, you should not see yourself as a rasha, as a wicked person. Darf man verstehen? So in this Mishnah we have the following questions. Aleph, darf man then ankommen? Do we need to come over here to learn about this? Zu atzivi Masechta Avos. For a lesson here in Masechta Avos, which is Milsa de Chasidusa. This is the Masechta that discusses behavior which is extra, more than the normal, for a pious individual. As muz zayin zohar and a mitzvah seder raisa or afila mitzvah seder abanan, that one should be careful in fulfilling a mitzvah min atayra, of saying Shema every day, or even a mitzvah min rabbanan of davening. On alachas kama v'kama, and most definitely di tzvei mitzvahs, these two mitzvahs that we're speaking about here, Kriyas Shema and Tefillah, so to say Kriyas Shema and to daven, was then in mitzvahs Ikriyas and Kloliyas and Avedis Hashem, which are very important and central mitzvahs in a person serving Hashem. So why, in the first part of this Mishnah, does Rab Shimon come and teach us, be careful to say Shema and daven every day? This is the most basic thing that every Yid has to do every day. You don't have to wait until you come to Pirkei Avos to learn about this. Beis, al derech zeh, another question there in the Tzveite Bava. In the second part of the Mishnah, don't daven just as a routine act, but it should be with feeling, begging Hashem for mercy. Was is in them der Oiftu? So what's here the novelty of this Mishnah, of the Mishnah Mefureshes and Masechta Brachas? When this is already said clearly in a Mishnah in Masechta Brachas, where it discusses these matters. Over there it says, that if your davening becomes just a routine, so then you're not davening to Hashem, you're not asking Hashem for mercy. So what's our Mishnah here adding more than what that Mishnah is telling us, that one should daven with feeling, with asking Hashem for mercy? Gimel, the third question and the last part of the Mishnah is, what's the shayches from the dritte hayra? What's the connection of the third lesson of this Mishnah? That a person should not consider himself to be a rasha, because if a person considers himself to be on such a low level, so then he will give up hope of ever doing tshuva. And also will not hold back from doing another aveda because he gave up. So the tzvei, friede, geheiros, and how is this connected to the two previous lessons, wegen der zehiros and kriyas shema and tefillah, about being careful to say kriyas shema and to daven. The nekuda sabir in the Mishnah. So the point to explain what this Mishnah is saying here, what's the chiddush of this Mishnah? The drei eiros in the Mishnah, the three lessons of this Mishnah, sind verbunden damit, was der Bala Maime, Rab Shimon ben Nesanel, is by him given teirasiyim nasai. This is connected with the one that said these three lessons, which is Rab Shimon ben Nesanel, and we find regarding him that his Torah, his learning Torah, was to the degree that this became his entire profession. And bedugme with Rab Shimon ben Yochai, similar to what we find by Rab Shimon ben Yochai, kidlakaman sivches, as the Rebbe later will bring the source for this, that we find that Rab Shimon ben Nesanel was on a level of Torah becoming his profession, similar to Rab Shimon ben Yochai. So now what's unique about an individual that the Torah nasai, Torah is your profession. There was nasai. So now a person that Torah becomes his entire profession is nit mafsik and limited Torah, so he doesn't interrupt of his learning to Kriyas Shema, not even to say Kriyas Shema, vi Rashbi zokt in Yerushalmi. As Rab Shimon ben Yochai himself says in the Yerushalmi as follows, Kagayin ano, people like us, including himself, sha'iskim b'talmud Torah, that we learn Torah all the time, afilu le Kriyas Shema einanu mafsikin. Even to read Kriyas Shema, we also don't interrupt of our learning. On alachas kama v'kama, and most definitely, as it is nit mafsik l'tfilah, that a person which is teirasiyim nasai does not have to interrupt to daven. V'de psak din, as teirasiyim nasai, ein mafsikin letfila. And this is actually the psak din of Shulchan Aruch, that a person that learning Torah is constant, this is his profession, does not have to stop to daven. So now, this will explain over here the lesson that Rab Shimon ben Asanel is teaching in this Mishnah here. So since he himself did not interrupt from his learning, not for Kriya Shema and not for davening, so therefore he had to give the lesson and to make sure regarding his students, observing his own behavior, so they shouldn't become weakened in their obligation of saying Kriya Shema every day and in davening every day, seeing that their teacher, Rabbi Shimon ben Asanel, did not interrupt for davening or for saying Kriya Shema. That's why he has to emphasize for them the obvious because of what they saw in him. Then comes the second lesson, Here, Rabbi Shimon ben Asanel is giving a lesson for his own colleagues. They also are on his level, where Torah was their profession. Not exactly on the very same level as his learning, his constant learning. There are various levels in Torah which will be discussed later here. So therefore, they do have to interrupt from their learning to say Kriya Shema, even if not for davening, but to say Kriya Shema, yes. Similar to the colleagues of Rab Shimon ben Yochai, as the Rebbe will bring and prove soon. So therefore, for them he says, when you daven, so here he's only talking about davening and not about Kriya Shema, because Kriya Shema, they obviously have to interrupt and say Kriya Shema, but when it comes to davening, they do not. So therefore he tells them, when you daven, your davening should not be something which is a routine, but it should be with feeling, asking Hashem for mercy. Which means as follows. Yes, you are also on a level which and therefore you do not have to interrupt for davening. However, when it does come from time to time and you do daven, and the Zeiten is an because even those individuals, as Rabbi here brings, ki yudua, as divas bazeis teirasim im nasam, zenanoich mispalel mizman lizman. Even those individuals that their learning is their profession and they don't interrupt for davening, but from time to time, even they also daven. As the Rabbi brings here in the Ha'ara, whether it's from year to year, once a year, or something similar to that they would daven. So for them, he was saying, zol dit tefillin et zayin and a neifen fun kva. Your davening should not be kvav. Now, what does kvav mean? So here, the Rebbe teaches what this means. Until I was translating it as routine, which would refer to someone that's actually davening every day. So your davening could become a routine. But for them, if they're davening from time to time, so what exactly is he explaining to them about their davening? That it should not be kva. As b'shasmaise trachter, a person that davens in a matter of a routine also, what happens? A person thinks to himself, when am I going to get rid of this yoke upon me and just daven and finish with this? And over here, in this case, they're davening from time to time and they're interrupting from their learning. When can I return to my profession, what I do all the time, to learn Torah? So he's telling them, even if you're only davening from time to time, when you daven, do not see it as a burden. You should daven and pay attention and feel what you say in your davening. That's the second lesson of the Mishnah. So again, this is specifically, we're talking about Rab Shimon ben Asanel, which was Teirasiyim Nasai. So he didn't want his students to learn from him, not to say Kriya Shema and not to daven. And then he's telling to his colleagues, which were not exactly on the same level as him, but similar, also Teirasiyim Nasai, that they that daven from time to time should daven with feeling. Now comes the third lesson of the Mishnah. By the drita hira, when it comes to the third lesson, do not see yourself as a person that's a rasha. This is a lesson which is connected specifically to the level of Rab Shimon ben Asanel, which Torah was his profession, as will be explained in the end of the Sikha in Sif Yud. Okay, so this is the basis of the explanation of the Mishnah. Now, even on this explanation in Havizar, B'Kriya Shema, about being careful in saying Kriya Shema, you could seemingly ask the following question. The idea from Rab Shimon ben Yochai, this opinion that was quoted before from the Yerushalmi in the name of Rab Shimon ben Yochai, as l'kriya shma einanu mafsikin, that even when he was learning, he would not interrupt for kriya shma either. Brengt sich not in Yerushalmi. This is only quoted in the Yerushalmi. Aber ledas ha-Bavli, and Azayach is the halacha, but in the Bavli and in Shulchan Aruch, zenen euch divas teirasam nasam, und afile kagayin rashbi v'chaveirav, mafsikin l'kriya shma. So even those that are teirasam nasam, the Torah is their profession, but nevertheless, people like Rab Shimon ben Yochai and his friends, they would also interrupt their learning for saying Kriya Shema. They only would not interrupt their learning for davening. So how could we say this pshat over here in the Mishnah regarding Kriya Shema and Tefillah, if the Bavli disagrees with this? Seemingly it would only fit with what it says in Yerushalmi. Is das baren them? So the answer is we could actually say that there's no argument there. And that's based on the following. Leighton Klal, so there's the following rule or sort of approach, as medaf mashve zayin, Bavli v'Yerushalmi koma defshe, that whenever it's possible to make the words of the Bavli and Yerushalmi fit with one another, so then that's the way you should interpret it. Even if you have to interpret something that it says in the Bavli or in Yerushalmi by a bit of a squeeze, and it's not exactly perfect and smooth, but nevertheless, to make the words fit with one another is more important. So therefore over here as well, is mistavet zu sagen, it's logical to say, as euch da is nit gempluktet zwischen Bavli und Yerushalmi. There's no argument here between the Bavli and Yerushalmi whether you interrupt for Kriya Shema if it's Teirasei of Nasei, nor es is a chilek zwischen Rashbi allein und Chaveirav. There's a difference between Rab Shimon ben Yochai himself and his colleagues, which were also on a level of Teirasei Nasei, but not the same as Rab Shimon ben Yochai himself. Now the Rabbi explains, the ta'af of Rab Shimon ben Yochai halt as medaf nit mafsik zayin l'kriya shma. What's the reason why he says that you don't have to interrupt for saying kriya shma? Is, so it says there in the Yerushalmi, val zeh talmud Torah shinun. Learning Torah is learning, and v'zeh kriya shma, saying kriya shma is also shinun. It's also learning. There's no reason to interrupt one learning of Torah for the purpose of saying Kriya Shema, which is also learning of Torah. And then the Yerushalmi there says in one answer, Rab Shimon ben Yochai al yidei shehoya choded b'divrei Torah. Rab Shimon ben Yochai, since he was sharp and he would study Torah, lefichach eina chaviva olav Kriya Shema yosem b'divrei Torah. So therefore, saying Kriya Shema was not more cherished to him than the learning that he was involved, engrossed in his learning. So this is what Rab Shimon ben Yochai is saying about himself. Or actually the Gemara there is saying about Rab Shimon ben Yochai. So now based on this, we can see here in the language of Yerushalmi that there's something unique about the level of Rab Shimon ben Yochai when it comes to Teirasei Nasei. Only he did not interrupt, even for the mitzvah of Kriya Shema, and as you can see this from the precise words that Yerushalmi says, Rashbi, al yidei shehoya choded b'divrei Torah, eina chaviva olav. The Yerushalmi is talking about specifically Rab Shimon ben Yochai, that for him, it was not cherished to him to stop to say Kriya Shema. Which is not the case when it comes to his colleagues, even though they were Teirasei Nasi, but not exactly on his level, and therefore they did stop to say Kriya Shema. And furthermore, we could say regarding Rab Shimon ben Yochai himself, Yeshleima, we can say, as this is by Im Given Achiluk, that there is a distinction regarding him, Eider is given in Meire, und das man noch seiner Reis came. Before Rab Shimon ben Yochai spent 12 or 13 years in a cave, and after he came out of the cave. After he came out of the cave, there are many things that changed. He was in a much higher level. As das was said, nit mafsik gewen le Kriya Shema, this that he did not interrupt his learning even for saying Kriya Shema, hat sich angegeben erst nach einer Reisung von Meide. This began only after he was elevated to a much higher level after those years that he was in the cave. When es hat sich bei ihm aufgetan der emmese Iloi in Shinun v'chidud and Limudat Torah. When he came to the real highest level of learning and totally engrossed into his learning, wie the Gemara erzählt in Shabbos, as the details that the Gemara says in Masechta Shabbos about those years that Rashbi spent in the cave. So now that we see this over here in the Yerushalmi, and by reconciling what it says in the Yerushalmi with the Bavli, we can come back and say similar regarding Rab Shimon ben Yochai. The Yishleim as Rab Shimon ben Esanel is given bedugmit to Rab Shimon ben Yochai. Rab Shimon ben Esanel was on a similar level to Rab Shimon ben Yochai, where it is given la'achre yitziyosem ben Amayra. After Rab Shimon ben Yochai came out of the cave. Kidle Kamon, as the Rebbe will bring later, the source from this in the Gemara and Chagige regarding the level of Rab Shimon ben Esanel. Und der Far hat nit mafsik given l'kriyishma. So therefore he himself, even the Bavli would agree, did not interrupt for even saying kriyishma. But his colleagues, though, were not exactly on his level, like we find regarding the Chaverim of Rab Shimon ben Yochai, and therefore they did say Kriya Shema, and also from time to time they daven, as the Rebbe explained before. So now this point, as by Rab Shimon ben Esanel is given Teirasi Emnase vi Rashbi, that his title was his profession like Rashbi. Und das ist die Nekudat Yichayna von die drei Erois from the Mishnah, and that this is the central point of the three lessons here in this Mishnah. Is Merum is in them, it's also hinted by the fact, was der Mesadera Mishnah, the Montnit Shem Ove from Bala Maimer, the one that set up the words of this Mishnah and also chose exactly the names of the Tanoim that are saying the lessons of the Mishnah, does not mention which Rab Shimon we're speaking about. It doesn't say his father's name, Rab Shimon ben Nesanel. Mit sein fullen Namen, Karago, with his full name, as he's usually mentioned in the Mishnayos. Nor blois Rab Shimon Stam. It just mentions his name as Rab Shimon. Vastam Rab Shimon is got Rab Shimon ben Yochai. Usually the rule is when you have Rab Shimon in a Mishnah without mentioning the father's name, it actually refers to Rab Shimon ben Yochai. So here, why does it say Rab Shimon Stam without mentioning that it's not Rab Shimon ben Yochai? Now, on Avos, even though you may argue and say that it's not necessary to spell out which Rab Shimon was speaking about, is as bepashtes, daftas the Mishnah done it oisteitchen befedish. Simply, the Mishnah does not have to spell this out clearly here. Warum die Mishnah kommt behemshech to the friedige Mishnayos from the Perek? Because this Mishnah here follows the Mishnayos previously in this Perek, where the Mishnah counts the 5 students of Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. Und zwischen sei Rab Shimon ben Esanel amongst them is also Rab Shimon ben Esanel. Und danach steht, and following this, the Mishnah says, Heim omru shloishe dvarim, that each one of these students gave 3 lessons. Als jeder von sie hat gesagt 3 Sachen, is doch me elov, move on. So if you read the Mishnah here in the context and you see who we're speaking about, so it's self-understood, as mit Rab Shimon oime, wird gemeint Rab Shimon ben Esanel. That this Rab Shimon is the Rab Shimon ben Esanel already mentioned before, one of the 5 students of Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. So it's not necessary for the Tana to spell out clearly which Rab Shimon this is. However, the fact that the Tana just says Rab Shimon and does not mention the father's name, so since as yeder inyan in Torah is meduyik b'tachlis, everything in Torah is precise. Ubefrat as the Eirois von Rab Shimon ben Esanel is in a bazunde Mishnah. Here, the lessons of Rab Shimon ben Esanel comes in a separate Mishnah. Kame Mishnayos weiter von dem Ort, wo es is mefurish shmei v'shem aviv, and it's a few Mishnayos later after it mentioned him by name and his father's name. Ubemele gittis amokim l'tois. It does give room for a mistake. For dervas land blois di Mishnah. If someone, not necessarily someone that's learning this Mishnah, is learning all the Mishnayos of the Perek, he may just be learning this Mishnah. As the Bala Maimer is Rashbi, so you may make a mistake and think that Rab Shimon over here just says Stam Rab Shimon, that this is Rashbi. So why? So in the end of the day, still the question remains to some extent, why did the Tana not spell out that this is Rab Shimon ben Esanel? Is verstandig, so the fact that it just says Rab Shimon is understood as mit dem Tam Pnimi in the Heirois for Rab Shimon ben Esanel, that looking deeper into understanding what's the background, what's really the deeper point of his lessons that he's saying here in the Mishnah, is negeya ni das was as Rab Shimon ben Esanel. It's not important to say that who he is Rab Shimon ben Esanel, specifically this individual being Rab Shimon, the son of Nesanel, nor das was as Rab Shimon Stam. Rather, the fact that his name is Rab Shimon and Rab Shimon Stam ein inyan mit Rashbi. In that sense, he carries the same name as Rab Shimon ben Yochai, and therefore he's similar to Rab Shimon ben Yochai, which was Teirasi Nasai. And from what we see by Rashbi, we could learn out to Rab Shimon ben Esanel to understand what the point of the lessons of this Mishnah are. So now to explain how we can actually see this comparison between the two, Rab Shimon ben Esanel and Rab Shimon ben Yochai, just in the very name itself of Rab Shimon. What's the significance, what's the meaning of this name, Rab Shimon? So now the Ta Primi Vastam Rab Shimon is Rashbi. Why is it that when the Mishnah says Rab Shimon, so without mentioning which Rab Shimon it speaks about, it refers to Rab Shimon ben Yochai? Weil the nomen Shimon, because there's a significance to the name Shimon. It's from Lashon Shmiya. It literally means to listen or to hear, but it also means is avana v'asaga. The real concept of listening is when you understand, when you comprehend what you're listening to. On that inyan from Teirasiyam Nasai, this really expresses the concept of a person that Teire is his profession. When a Yid learns Teire all day and all night, to the point that he becomes unified with the Teire, busy verts and ganze umnis, and therefore becomes his whole profession. When does this happen? When by him is die Askale verstanden Teire b'shleimusa. It's when a person learns, and he's not just spending the time reading the words of Teire, but he actually learns and connects and fully comprehends and understands the words of Teire. Then you become totally united with the Teire. In the words of the Alter Rebbe, Tanya mitayichud nifla, with a wondrous unity, she'ein yichud kamayu. No other union compared to this. To be literally one from every angle, every corner with the Teire that you learn. That is the concept of Teirasiyum Nasai, which is expressed in Shmiya, when a person not only hears but listens and understands and internalizes the word of Teire, the words of Teire that he learns. So from this we understand, regarding others that have the same name, and as it's known as the Shemus von an Yidden, when it comes to names of Yidden, or befrat von die Tanoim, Holo, and especially his holy Tanoim, they express the content and the point of what their Aveda consisted of. As by Zeh is da, behelam akoponim ame'en von stam Rabshim. That one that carries this name has, at least on a concealed level, this power, and similar to Stam Rab Shimon, which is Rashbi, Teirasiyim Nasai. Und der Fahr ist die Mishnah medayik zu sagen da Rab Shimon Stam. So therefore the Mishnah here is precise by only mentioning the name Rab Shimon without the father. As das was Rab Shimon ben Esanel gesagt di Eirais, the fact that he said these lessons that are mentioned here in the Mishnah is es mitzadem was hatten sich die Meile von Rab Shimon Stam, Rashbi. He's saying these lessons because of the level that he was on, which was similar to Rab Shimon Meyachai, and it's expressed in his name, Rab Shimon, the full connection to Torah on a level of Teirasiyam Nasi. So now to get a deeper appreciation and to understand what really Teirasiyam Nasi means, the Rebbe says as follows. The gather from Teirasiyam Nasi and Pashtus is, now on a simple and basic understanding of what this means, that Torah becomes your profession, so that would mean as follows. As Aleph, number one, das is an Inyan in Zman. It's simply a matter of time. The person's full occupation. Learn Torah on Eife. The person learns Torah without interruption. Und is dit mafstit slip kein Zach. He doesn't interrupt his learning for anything. That's one thing, simply. Beis, another point here, es is da euch bei limud nigle de Torah. For a person to be on this level where he learns to this extent without any interruption, this could even be true learning the revealed part of Torah. As we find this regarding Rab Shimon Mechai himself, as Afilin Mayra is Iker Esker Geven and Teiris HaMishnayis. What did he do when he was in the cave for all those many years? So he was learning the Mishnayis, all the halachas of Nigla, the Torah, as the Alter Rebbe says in Tanya, Onitten Sefer HaZayah V'Tikunim. He wasn't learning the Kabbalah, Zayah, Tikunim, the secrets of the Torah. He was learning Mishnayis, Nigla. That's included in Teirasiyam Nasai, a person that learns and understands and connects to the Torah, even in the Nigla of Torah. Steht aber in Zayar, however, there's a deeper level and a deeper concept of what Teirasiyam means. So the Zayar says, as mit Teirasam Nasam meint men, that Torah being your profession means die was leizazes schinte min hoin kol yemeyen. Those are people that the Shchine does not budge from them their entire life. Und sie sind dire le Schchinte, a person that becomes a dwelling for the Shchine. Was davon ist verstandig. So from this expression of the Zayah regarding what Teirasiyam Nasi means, we understand 2 points. Aleph, number one, that Ilu from Teirasiyam Nasi, what is really the level of a person that Teira becomes his profession? Besteht in der Eichusdige Zugebundenkeit zu Teira. This is a level of a connection, a deeper level of a nature of connection that there is to the Torah that a normal person doesn't have. It's not just a matter of the time, the quantity of the time, but there's a deeper level of connection here. As ein ganze Metzius is durchgenommen mit Torah, that his entire entity becomes permeated with Torah, His entire being is not das was is adira l'shchinte. He loses his own identity altogether, and his whole being becomes just this, that he's a dwelling, he's a place, a dwelling for the Shekhinah to dwell within him. That's the real concept of Torah Siyam Naseh. Beis, another point here is, now this connection here to the Torah is nit not zu chachmas ha-Torah. It's not only to the wisdom of the Torah, nor be'ikir zum neisan ha-Torah. It's primarily to the giver of the Torah, as the Zayas Lashon Shchinte, to the Shekhinah that there is in the Torah. This level of learning is connected specifically to when one learns the secrets, the inner part of Torah, as it clearly says in the Tikkunei Zayar, as dafke, more Kabbalah, specifically those that are the masters of learning Kabbalah, the secrets of Torah, of the law to the Shekhinah dire. They could provide for Hashem a dwelling through their learning Torah, the secrets of Torah. So therefore, Torah Siyam Naseh is specifically to those that learn the secrets of Torah, the Kabbalah and Torah, and so on. Das ist euch die Yisoid von dem, was Chassidus is mevayer. This is also the basis for what it says in Chassidus about is mevayer the meaning from Torah Siyam Naseh. The way Chassidus explains this level of a person that Torah becomes his profession. So it says as follows: as the limudat Torah is an anaifim from v'osim dvarai beficha, that Hashem places His words into your mouth, which means the divrei Torah was the leimed zakt areis von sein Mail, the words of Torah that the learner is saying out of his mouth, then is misyaches zum Eibishten. It relates back to the Eibishter. It's not my words that I think as an entity for myself to learn and speak the words of Torah, but I become a dira for the Eibishter's words to come through me out of my mouth. Sagt noch, that is, he only repeats the divrei Torah, was the Eibishter kaviyachol sagt, which the Eibishter says, and the person is just like a funnel to repeat what Hashem has said. This level of learning, when you have an absolute self-nullification to the giver of the Torah, to the level, to the point that you just become a pure dwelling for the Eibishter within you. Rabbi says, move on. So now based on this we understand. As das was Rabbi is given Torah Siyam Naseh. That this, that Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai was Torah Siyam Naseh, is verbunden mit dem, was is given from the Mare Kabbalah. This is connected to what we all know about Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai, that he was from the masters of Kabbalah. Not only was he one of the masters of Kabbalah, is given der, was hat Mashpia given Pnimiyus HaTorah zu andere Tanoim. He's the one that taught Pnimiyus HaTorah, the secrets of Torah, to the other holy Tanoim. Was the far is given in the Darga Achi Nailis and Torah Siyam Naseh Gufe. And therefore, as we said before, in this concept of being a person that Torah becomes your profession, and now based on what we understand in Zayah, this means the full self-nullification to Hashem and being a dwelling for Hashem, he was on a very high level of Torah Siyam Naseh. So now based on this, we could also understand what we find over here regarding the fact that when you're on such a level of learning, you don't have to interrupt even for Kriya Shema. And even the Bavli agrees to that. The Mitvit, this adds a deeper explanation here. In them, was Rashbi Dafka hat nit mafse gewen le Kriya Shema. Why Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai did not interrupt even to say Kriya Shema. Today, as the limudat Torah zal sein, in an eifem from vasim dvarei beficha kanal, in order for a person's learning to be on this level, that it's Hashem's words that are coming out of your mouth, muz mefriye stein and a bittel betachlis zu elikos. So you have to be in a very high, full level of self-nullification to Hashem. Und das wird getan durch der Avodah von Kriya Shema. How does one come to such a level of self-nullification? When you say Kriya Shema, when you accept the yoke of Hashem, the yoke of heaven, by saying Kriya Shema, was in Yon is Mesiras Nefesh, and also to the point of total self-sacrifice. That's Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad, to be ready to give up your life, and b'chol levavcha, b'chol nafshecha, b'chol meidecha. So that's usually how you come to this level of bittul. However, when it comes to Rashbi, and specifically after those years that he spent in the cave, is ständig gestanden betachlis habittel zelikus. He was constantly on this level of absolute self-nullification to Hashem. And he himself says in the Zayar, Ano simone ba'alma. My entire being in this world is just an indicator for something that's higher than me. Meaning, he himself has nothing, he has no entity for himself. Und sein ganze Metzias, what is he? Who is he? Is nur was that is a simin of Gatlachkeit. He is a walking indicator or a walking sign for godliness that exists. So that means that he was the ultimate dwelling for the Shechina in this world, was the Fashteit, and therefore it says in the Zohar something else about Rab Shimon ben Yochai, regarding him, Man, Penei, Odn, Havavaye, who is the face of the Master, Hashem, Dorashbi. This is Rab Shimon ben Yochai, because Rab Shimon ben Yochai and Hashem were one and the same thing. He was so unified with the source, with Hashem. Und der Pfarr hat nicht gedacht haben, der Akdame von Kriya Shema. So therefore he did not need the introduction of saying Kriya Shema, as sein Limudat Torah soll sein, and an Eifem von Torah Siyam Nasei, to bring him to this level of bittul, to bring him to this level of Mesiris Nefesh, because this was the level that Rab Shimon ben Yochai was always on. So that's why he did not interrupt from his learning to say Kriya Shema. So now, from here we come to where we find in the Gemara similar regarding Rab Shimon ben Nesanel. Now that we understand that the concept of Torah Siyam Nasei on the highest level that we find by Rashbi is, number one, a absolute bittul to Hashem, being a dira for the Shechina, and that's specifically for Marei Kabbalah, those that teach Kabbalah. We find similar by Rab Shimon ben Nesanel. Es wird erzählt in Gemara. The Gemara in Chagiga says the story, as Rabbi Elazar ben Arach hat gebeten Reshus bei Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, ibe zu sagen for him, so he asked his teacher, Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, permission whether he could repeat something from Ma'aser Merkava, which is deep secrets of Kabbalah that you have in the Psukim, that Ma'aser Merkava, which talk about the spiritual worlds above. So he wanted to say over something that Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai had taught him. That's the beginning of the story. Then the Gemara there afterwards says, after Rabbi Elazar ben Arach opened up his mouth and began darshaning things that Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai taught him, is Yardeish min hashamayim v'chulu, a fire descended from heaven. What happens later? When the Gemara is dort mamshich, the Gemara continues and says, as Verem Yosi Akayin, on Rab Shimon ben Nesanel, then when these two holy Tanoim, Rabbi Yosi Akayin and Rab Shimon ben Nesanel, haben wegen dem gehört, they heard about this. Afheim paschu b'Ma'aser Merkava. They also began to expound upon the matters of Ma'aser Merkava, the secrets of Torah. Amru, and they said, Yom Echad b'Tkufas Tammuz Haya. So it was said about that time that it was a day in the middle of the summer in Tammuz. And v'ro'ah ha'aretz, the whole earth began to tremble. V'niras ha'keshes ba'anan, and there were clouds in the sky, and there was a keshes, a rainbow that was seen in the clouds. And v'yatza baska v'amra v'chulu, and then there's a baska that came out to respond to the secrets of Torah that they said. So even though it was the middle of the summer and in Eretz Yisrael, there's no rain, there's no clouds in that time, there were clouds and there was a rainbow. So this is the story it says in the Gemara, and it says here, we're speaking about Rabbi Yosi Akayin and Rab Shimon ben Nesanel. Zetman from them, so what you see from here is, as Rab Shimon ben Nesanel is given from the Marei Kabbalah. Rab Shimon ben Nesanel amongst the Tanoim was from the masters that taught Kabbalah. On such a level, as Zayin Reden in Ma'aser Merkava, that him repeating things or saying things about Ma'aser Merkava, hat aufgetan as Ro'ah ha'aretz v'chulu v'yatza paska v'amra. It had such a tremendous impact that the whole world trembled, and a baskel came out and responded to him. Es hat mamshach gewend Shechina lamata. When it says that there was a baskel, that means that he drew down, he generated a revelation of the Shechina to come down here below. Und von dem ist verstandig, as is given, dir le Shechinte. So from this we understand that he became a dwelling for the Shechina here in this world. Not sufficient the Yibim the Monte Tanoim Gufe, but now here we see this wasn't Rab Shimon ben Nesanel alone. We have Rabbi Elazar ben Arach that darshaned in matters of Kabbalah. There's Rabbi Yosi Akayin and there's Rab Shimon ben Nesanel. So seemingly he's just one amongst the others. Not necessarily does he stand out in this sense to be maybe on a level similar to Rab Shimon ben Yochai. But however, the Rebbe says, if you look over here and you pay attention to the details, you'll see that amongst all these is Do'an Ilui in Rab Shimon ben Nesanel. There is a tremendous advantage to the level of Rab Shimon ben Nesanel, was the far is dafke bedugmet to Rashbi. It's specifically him that's similar to Rashbi, and wird angerufen Shimon Kanal Siv Gimel. And he carries the same name of Shimon like Rab Shimon ben Yochai. Rabbi Elazar ben Arach. So the reason is as follows, because when it comes to Rabbi Elazar ben Arach, hat nur ibe gesagt an Inyen, was Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai hat ihm gelernt, limadetoni. He only repeated a matter of Kabbalah that he was taught from Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai. Und nicht was hat machadish gewesen. Not something that he himself was machadish, his own innovation. Now, the other two over here, Tzvish Rabbi Yosi Akayin and Rab Shimon ben Nesanel, these two Tanoim, Rabbi Yosi Akayin and Rab Shimon ben Nesanel, was haben deutlich gewesen in Ma'aser Merkava, and an Eufen vom Paschal. And they both began to expound on Meiser Merkava. They opened up a new concept, B'koyach Atzmam. On their own, they were mechadish something themselves. Ubefrat al derech ha-yidua. More specifically, so it's known regarding this expression of Pascha that they opened in the Pirish from Pasach Rab Shimon v'chayetze b'zeh. Many times in Tzayar it says Rab Shimon opened as das meint as hat oivgetan anayim inyim v'tzine v'chulu, that he drew down from above a completely new breakthrough, a new opening. So over here as well, these two Tanoim, Rab Yosi HaKayin, Rab Shimon ben Asanel, expounded and opened up a completely new Hamshacha, a new opening in the subject of Merkava. So now between these two is Doan Ilui in Rab Shimon ben Asanel of Rab Yosi HaKayin. There's still an advantage to the level of what Rab Shimon ben Asanel was on and what he accomplished more than Rab Yosi HaKayin. Why is this? Because Rab Yosi was a Kayin, Kohone, the fact that he's a Kayin, which the meaning of the word Kohone is the Zugegreitkeit lamed l'sharas lofnei Hashem. Someone that's prepared, he's designated to come and serve Hashem. Rabbi Yosi HaKayin. Bakumtach b'Yerusha, so he receives as an inheritance this power. The Ribber is oich zayin posach b'Meiser Merkava. So even this, that he opens up on a subject of Meiser Merkava, nid gar en ganzen aniyim from posach b'koyach atzmai. This is not something which is something that he opens up completely on his own, as his own achievement that he worked on his own. He has this power that's given to him being a Kayin. The Shleim is the Gebavai on his minaz adira l'shchinte. Where do you have the highest, complete, ultimate level to prove that he is a full dira for the Shchine? Is the ganze Metzies von Menschen is miyuchod mit Shchinte, that the entire entity of the person is completely unified with the Shchine. Is when the Psyche b'Meiser Merkava, when the one that opens up on this subject of Meiser Merkava on an anoifim was poiled, rasha haaretz v'chula, and to the extent that the impact is that the whole world trembles, kommt den ganzen von sein eigenem koyach. Something that comes completely his own accomplishment from his own koyach that he worked from below. Und das gefindt man dafke bei Rab Shimon ben Asanel, and this we find specifically by Rab Shimon ben Asanel, was wird nicht angerufen HaKayin. He's not referred to as a Kayin. Is nicht given a Kayin because he wasn't a Kayin. There's a bit of a discussion about this in Hara 65. You can take a look. Und von deswegen hat Pesach gewähnt b'Meiser Merkava b'Ofen Anal. And yet he on his own worked on himself to refine himself and to elevate himself to be able to open on his own a tremendous breakthrough in Meiser Merkava to the point that the whole world trembles. So this shows on what kind of a great level he was on regarding his learning of Meiser Merkava and learning of Kabbalah, and that's why we compare him to Rab Shimon ben Yochai. Der Ilui von Rab Shimon ben Asanel, deutlich sein bei Meiser Merkava. So this tremendous level of Rab Shimon ben Asanel in expounding on a subject of Meiser Merkava. Oif Rabbi Elazar ben Arach, even more than Rabbi Elazar ben Arach, is oich mudgish in them. It's also emphasized in this that it says in the Zohar, was dafke b'shasar pesach gewend, by Meiser Merkava. That it's when he began speaking about Meiser Merkava, what happens? Rosh ha'aretz, the whole world trembles, and also v'nirasa ha'keshes ba'anan. And there's the keshes, rainbow that appears in the clouds. Well, that's a given nes. So this is obviously a miracle. Varim says given tkufas tammuz. This is right in the middle of the summer. It's not at all a time when you have clouds. So now you see here in the Gemara that it says that the fact that there is a rainbow shows us something, a great revelation because of the Meiser Merkava that he said. So seemingly this needs further clarification. The Gemara tells us on Ilui of Rabbi Shua ben Levi that what's the great level of Rabbi Shua ben Levi as lo niras akeshes b'yamav, that there was never a rainbow that appeared in his time, in his lifetime. Varom the keshes is a peule und an ois shelo yacher va'olam. The rainbow is something and it's a sign that shows that the world will not be destroyed. V'im yesh tzadikama b'doir ein tzarich ois. And if you have a real full tzaddik in the generation, so then you don't even need this sign at all. So that's why there's no rainbow in his generation, because he was the tzaddik, and therefore he saves his generation. So haintiv so, was is the ilui? So what's here, this tremendous accomplishment, as durich zayin darshan b'Meiser Merkava, that when he expounds on these subjects of Merkava, is nirasa keshes ba'anan, that the rainbow appears in the clouds. That's seemingly a negative thing, not a positive thing. Is the beer in them? So the explanation for this is when it comes to a rainbow, you find two different things. Aleph number one, this is an ois bris shalayi oid mabel. This is a sign that Hashem will not destroy the world; He won't bring a mabel again. But then there's another point though. Beis of Keshes state regarding a rainbow, it says in the Medrash, as es is adova shehu mukish li. The rainbow, the colors of the rainbow, is something which is compared to Hashem himself. Es ist zugeglichen geworden zum Eibishten. It's compared to Hashem himself. Und the far is the din, and therefore the halacha is brought in Shulchan Aruch as well as Oster istakel bekeshes. One should not gaze at a rainbow. V'lechas lakavet kaina. It's like gazing at Hashem himself, and you're not having the proper honor for Hashem. So we see that a rainbow is a representation of something which is a revelation of something similar to Hashem. Furthermore, even more important, Gimel, the third point about a rainbow, mefurish b'maisim rekava. It clearly says in the psukim that speak about maisim rekava and Yecheskel the Beyaskin on the subject that we're speaking about over here, that Abshim ben Asanel spoke maisim rekava. So it says there, kemara keshes ashiyeh ba'onon, like the appearance of a rainbow in the clouds. Kain mara gaime. This is the appearance that there is above in the spiritual world. So mara demus kveid Hashem, the appearance of the holy glory of Hashem. So we see that a rainbow represents a tremendous level of revelation. It's move on, so we understand as das is a gilui nailef and shchine. This is a very higher level of revelation of the shchine was bringt as a zayin der keshes banan that brings about this revelation, this appearance of the rainbow in the clouds. That erste from keshes. The first point about the cloud, about the rainbow, is nervous as company b'yoyme de iva and afavolketen tag. That it's a sign that the Eibishter will not bring a mabel, so that comes on a cloudy day. Was the anonym weisen, as this is a tok von dinim koshen. The fact that it's a cloudy day naturally shows that this is a day, this is a time where there are very harsh judgment upon the generation, and therefore the rainbow is a sign that Hashem is saving the generation from destruction. Aber die Anonym und Keshes was kommen durch them was medarschen b'maiser mekave, but the clouds and the rainbow that appears miraculously in the time when you say they expound upon maiser mekave, sind nicht an ois of shayla zayin dinim. This is not a sign to negate any harsh judgment on the generation. Nor blois as simin of agili nailef and shchina. Rather, this is an indication that there's a tremendous revelation of shchina that's taking place. And now based on this, is noch mehr verstandig, we can appreciate even more wie Rab Shimon ben Sanel is given Teirasi Nosei, that he was on a very high level of those that are learning Torah and completely unified with Torah. And in Anaifen, wie is given Dira L'Shchinte, and his entire entity was totally nullified to Hashem, and his whole being is just a dwelling for the Shechina in him. Now based on this, we will come now to the last lesson of the Mishnah, which is Al Tihi Rasha B'fnei Atzpecha, do not see yourself as wicked in your eyes. So how and why is Rab Shimon ben Asanel pointing this out right over here? With the following introduction. One of the things that we described, the very high level of Rab Shimon ben Yochai, is given das was hat gesagt. It's this that he said, Yachal ani lifter es kol ha'olam kulei min adin, that I, based on my merits, can exempt the entire world of any judgment. So now we know, as we said before, that the level of Rab Shimon ben Yochai hat sich ausgedrückt in dem, was bei ihm ist gewähnt Teirasi Nasa. It's expressed by the fact of Teirasi Nasa, as was explained at length before. It's verstandig, so it's understood, as das was hat gekent patrin, as kol ha'olam kulei min adin, so the fact that the whole world could be exempt of any judgment is verbunden mit dem Inyan von Teirasi Nasa. It's connected with this, that he was on this level of Teirasi Nasa. So now, another point here is, which was spoken already about before at length, in the Maimah from Avshbi, this is Rab Shimon ben Yochai says, Yochel ani lifter es kol ha'olam kulei min adin, that I could patter the whole world of judgment, is das nicht durch dem, was hat gekent bei Wirken, die Anshei Deiroi Poel sei sie soll tshuvetan. His point was not to say that he could influence all the people of his generation, that they should come around and do tshuva. Because then, as the Rebbe says in the Ha'ara, if he in fact could do that, so the question is, so why did he not? Why does he just say, Yochelni, that I could patter the whole world? So that's not what it's talking about bringing all the people to do tshuva. No, rather, Azayin's chus is given as a grace, that his own merit was so great, as nit cooking of the Avenis in them there. Not looking at the Avedis of the people in the generation, is there soivel, kol Avenis seyem, upoitron min adin. He could handle, he could tolerate all of these Avedis, and he can exempt everybody from judgment because of the tremendous zechusim that he himself has. So this is what we know, and it says regarding Rab Shimon ben Yochai. Now the same can be said about Rab Shimon ben Esanel. Vibalt, as Rab Shimon ben Esanel is given der Ilui von Teirasiyim Nasai bedugmit zu Rab Shimon Mechai Kanal, since he had also this level of Teirasiyim Nasai similar to Rab Shimon Mechai, as we explained, and therefore he has the same name. Rab Shimon is Euch Zayin Oiv Tu in Welt given, so therefore his influence on the world was also Al Derech dem Inyan was Rashbi had gesagt Yachal ani liftes koloilim kulim in adin, that he could pater the whole world from any judgment. Now, Pizes, and now based on this, wird werden verstandig die Scheiches von der dritte Heiron, der Mishnah, Alti Rosh b'fnei Atzmacho zu der Friedige Zwei. We understand the final lesson of this Mishnah, that a person should not see himself as a Rasha, to what it said before regarding what Rab Shimon ben Esanel said, which he was speaking about people that are Teirasiyim Nasai, that they should nevertheless, they should daven, they should learn, they should not learn from him. Or he was speaking to his colleagues about them, that when they daven, it shouldn't be kfa, they should daven properly. So what's the connection here? Daf gimitzadem was Rab Shimon ben Esanel is given Teirasim Nasi vi Rashbi, because Rab Shimon ben Esanel was on this very high level of Teirasim Nasi like Rashbi, wie das wird ausgedrückt in die erste zwei Hayrais in the Mishnah, which is understood and is expressed in the first two lessons of the Mishnah, as has been explained before at length. And based on this, and therefore is megan of sein doir and soivul kolam in his same, and therefore he protects the whole generation and he handles all their avedas with his own merits. So here you immediately have to come and forewarn everybody and tell them, do not be a rasha, be sure to do tshuva. Why does this have to be clarified over here? So the point is as follows. B'chlal, usually when you have people that are on the level that must do tshuva and they're a rasha and they refuse to do tshuva, so what happens is Avos haltzich via rasha, a person that considers himself to be a rasha, or b'meile vet mitzad atzmai nitzuchem ton tshuvaton, and therefore he himself will not at all want to be interested in do tshuva. So what happens is the anhage von yoa anayusa liyehudai. So to use the expression the Gemara says one time, that what happens is the Gemara says that poverty is beautiful for the Jews. What does this mean? As me brengt, if a mention perani is v'yisurim rachman al-Itzlan, it's possible that Hashem brings punishment or suffering upon an individual. V'tzebrechen zayin metzias, so it'll break the klippah that's in him that does not allow him to do tshuva, bringing him to tshuva, and this will awaken him. This will bring him to do tshuva. That's what would usually happen for a person that's stubborn and that considers himself to be a rasha and does not do tshuva. So therefore the Yisurim will do the job and bring him to do tshuva. But when it comes to the generation of Rab Shimon ben Esanel, which was similar to the generation of Rashbi, so in his generation, so his own schos protects the generation of any punishment. So even if people are doing Avedas and not doing tshuva, but he's protecting all of them. So there's no Yisurim that can be brought upon them. So therefore you have to specifically bavarin and forewarn them, do not be a rasha, be sure to do tshuva. As soll wissen sein, that all should know, as jeder can, that everybody can, und darf, and therefore must, and as the promise is that nobody will be rejected and everybody will be accepted through his tshuva, every yid will and could do tshuva. So when a person is stubborn and doesn't want to do tshuva, he's demoralized, he gives up, he's a rasha in his eyes, we tell him, do not be a rasha in your eyes, because you could do tshuva. And in this is a generation where you can't wait for Yisurim or punishment to come and oppress a person, to bring out of him, to awaken him to tshuva. So therefore the Mishnah has to tell him, to remind him that you must go ahead and do tshuva, and your tshuva will be successful. Und nachmer, even more so, in such a generation, you don't have to wait until you'll chas v'shalom experience any suffering, nor can tshuvaton. In such a generation like Rab Shimon ben Esanel or Rab Shimon ben Yochai, you can do tshuva mitoch harchave, in a time and in a place of good and in broadness and expansiveness, v'chayim menucha, and a life of peace and tranquility, v'shalva, peace and tranquility. That's the connection of the last point in the Mishnah to the other two in this special generation of Rab Shimon ben Esanel.